Another one caught. You did good today, Mr. Bennett. Just keep an ice pack on your knee for 30 minutes, or more if necessary. You've already taken ibuprofen and acetaminophen, so no more for 3 hours. Yeah, I remember. When are you coming in? Well, it's Monday. You'll do your exercises tomorrow, and I'll be here on Wednesday. Remember, on Wednesday we start working an earlier schedule. No more of these late morning workouts. I'll be here at 9 o'clock, and then you'll have a free day after that. Sounds good. Drive safe, Maggie. I'm not going anywhere. That last sentence made her grin. I couldn't go anywhere yet. She's a pleasant enough person when she's finished, but a damn sadist when she's working me over. 10 days ago, I had knee replacement surgery on my right knee. I had heard stories about post-op physical therapy, and there was nothing good about it except it won't last forever. I thought I could survive almost anything if I knew the end was just around the corner. But I guess everyone I know has a higher pain threshold than me. It was torture. The whole idea of physical therapy after knee replacement is to achieve at least 90 degrees of knee flexion. Sounds simple, right? The surgeon cuts the tissues, and then the tissues regenerate by joining fibers and fusing together. The problem is that the severed segments tend to attach to anything nearby, and physical therapy is designed to break up all those unwanted attachments until the knee starts working properly again and bending as it should. Think about that while you pour me a beer. The therapist got in her car and drove off. In case anyone's wondering, her name is Maggie. She's actually a good kid, but she has no pity. She's heard the screams before and knows that pain is the path to recovery. When I'm feeling magnanimous, I call her baby. I think she's in her early 20s and I'm 57, so she's a baby to me. Not that it matters, but my name is Henry Bennett, and I make custom kitchen cabinets in a small 4-person shop I own. And yes, one of those people is a woman, and she's a damn good carpenter and cabinet maker, but I'm old school and saying 4-person store just doesn't sound right. I'm thinking about expanding the business and making furniture, mostly Windsor chairs, so retirement is not on my mind. It seems like I'm up and down all day, squatting, standing, and then kneeling on this hard floor, so somehow the cartilage in my knee has worn out and I've gotten some factory replacement parts. So I'm sitting here at my window with my leg up, with ice on my knee, and I'm watching Maggie drive away when I notice Jenny Carpenter pulling into her garage across the street. The Carpenters are in their early 20s. Chris is also a carpenter by trade, which makes his last name even more ironic. Carpenter is a carpenter, and he's working hard to start his own small company of carpentry contractors. They do good work and are in demand by homeowners who need repairs and remodeling, as well as mid-sized companies who often need additional expertise. I know he dreams of expanding his company to become a premier contractor for new homes, and we had a long talk about how to grow a young company. This is something I know a little bit about. Jenny takes this opportunity to be an attractive blonde working for one of the big investment houses in town. I liked her. I thought to myself, they really are the perfect couple when I saw a black BMW pull up in her driveway. It's not often you see cars like that in this neighborhood, and it's not often you see a guy in an expensive suit walk through your neighbor's front door like he owns the place. But that's what I saw that day. I watched Jenny's house while I kept ice applied to my knee. After half an hour of ice applied to my knee, I go to the kitchen to get a sandwich. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't carry a plate and a drink at the same time while I use the damn walker to get back to the living room. So I pack the sandwich in a paper bag and pour the drink in a cup, put both in the stupid basket on the front of the walker, and walk back to my chair. I lower myself into my seat and the BMW is still there. I also have some ice, so I put the ice pack back on my knee as I sit and look at the neighbor's house across the street. Time is ticking away. A long hour passes before the suit finally leaves. 10 minutes later, the garage door opens and Jenny leaves too. Okay, I say to myself. There are 1,000 perfectly decent excuses for what I just saw. Jenny isn't one of them. I try to put it out of my mind, but I'm bored as hell sitting here. Damn it, I need a book, or a crossword puzzle, or something else to occupy my thoughts. The workshop has called twice with fairly simple questions. I suspect they were just keeping in touch, just so I didn't feel left out. With nothing to do, I decided to look through some chair design books and started thinking of ideas for a line of simple, stylish chairs we could make in the workshop. I was still sitting there in the late afternoon, alternating between lifting my leg and doing flexion exercises, or going to get an ice pack, while I worked on the chair design books myself. While reading, I was sketching out some design ideas, trying to design something traditional but comfortable. It was already getting dark when I happened to look up and saw Chris's SUV pulling into their garage. Jenny's car was already parked in its usual spot. It was then that my thoughts returned to the black BMW and the driver in the fancy suit who seemed to act like he lived here. I started to gather my sketches and notes when I saw Chris crossing the street. He was heading towards my house. I slowly walked to the door and opened it just as he appeared. I stepped back to let him into the house, which was harder than one would think with those damn walkers. "Chris, what brings you here?" "Well, Jenny thought that since you were recovering and couldn't spend much time on your feet, you might enjoy a home-cooked meal. So she packed a dinner for you and sent me across the street to deliver it." I laughed. "I like your girl." As we slowly made our way back to the kitchen, I asked, "And what did your beautiful wife cook for this tired old man? First of all, you're not old, but tired." I was still laughing, but Chris was indeed the first visitor all day, unless you count Nurse Payne, and I was enjoying his company. He put the food on the table and started unpacking it. There was a big bowl of corn chowder, some ham biscuits, and a nice salad. "My goodness, there's enough here for both of us." "Oh, no way. If I eat one bite, my wife will find out and I'll be in a lot of trouble. It's all for you." I admit I was smiling now. "I think there's enough for dinner and tomorrow's lunch. Please tell your lovely wife thank you for me. Now, may I offer you a beer before you make this long and arduous trek home?" Chris smiled. He knew my gratitude was sincere. "No, she'll be waiting for me. I'd better get going. I'll try to stop by tomorrow night. I'll be here. I have nowhere to go for the next few weeks." Just as quickly, I walked Chris to the door, shook his hand, and he left. As I watched my friend walk toward his house, I thought about the value of good friends and caring wives. I'm sure I'm wrong about her, I thought. She's not like that. That night I enjoyed dinner. I also felt I had accomplished something with my drawings and notes, so I spent the evening watching TV and reading. I also consumed another bag of ice. Then, after taking another ibuprofen and acetaminophen, I headed to bed. Tuesday went mostly without incident. I made a simple breakfast of yogurt and granola with a glass of orange juice, took ibuprofen and acetaminophen, and then carried my coffee to the chair in the living room. I sipped the coffee for about 20 minutes, letting the pills take effect, and then began an unpleasant activity, exercising my new store-bought knee. No pain, no gain. My exercises start with a series of simple movements, such as leg lifts and ankle movements. Then I start bending my knee while lying down, and when I'm ready, I use a rubber band to pull my ankle toward me, forcing my knee to bend. I do repetitions, and by the time I'm already breathing like a long-distance runner, I'm ready to stop and ice my knee. It's not hard work, but it takes a lot of discipline to pull that tape knowing it's going to hurt like hell. For the next half hour, I am content to support my leg and ice it. Mid-morning, I'm ready to get on with my day and get back to work on the drawings I started yesterday. Sitting by the window, I work and observe the world. Neighbors come and go from their homes. Dan Williams is mowing his lawn. He is retired and has turned lawn and grounds maintenance into an obsession. I guess that's what happens when you don't fish or play golf. The Daniels went out for a late morning walk, and later Herb Jackson went for a run. The UPS truck delivers some boxes up and down the street, and eventually the mailman delivers the mail. It's funny, but no one seems to see me sitting by the window. I'm working and looking out the window when I see Herb walk up to the Perkins front door and go inside. Strange. Jim Perkins is away on business this week. I keep watching and trying to work, and he doesn't come out the back door until an hour later, walks down the driveway and heads for his house. I tell myself that I'm letting my imagination take over, but at the same time I start to think that I might be living in my own Peyton place. Is all of this really happening when I leave for work each day? And what exactly am I seeing? There has to be an acceptable explanation, so I try to brush it off and get back to work. By the time evening comes, I've exercised 3 times, taken my pills every 3 hours to, as they say, keep the pain at bay and finish the last of Jenny's corn chowder and ham biscuits. Chris is home and I haven't seen Jenny until her usual time, so again I try to rid myself of the thoughts that have come over me. Wednesday morning comes and soon Nurse Payne arrives. I had just enough time before she arrived to make myself a light breakfast to calm those 2 pills in my stomach and drink some coffee as an advance reward for what was ahead of me. She has been especially hard on me this day, but claims that my knee is coming back to normal and that she expects full mobility. I remind her that I've never been this flexible, but she just ignores me. I offer her a cup of coffee before I leave, but she says, "I tried your coffee. You can use it to leave stains on the furniture." I try to tell her that there was a time when some furniture manufacturers did just that, but she just shakes her head and says, "See you on Friday. Do your exercises and ice it." The pain nurse leaves and I sit with an ice pack on my knee and finish the rest of my cooled coffee. After that, everything repeats like the previous day. Dan is working in his garden this day, the Daniels take their morning walk, and I see Herb Jackson visiting Sally Perkins again. I'm telling you, this is bloody Sodom and Gomorrah. It's lunchtime and I'm getting ready to make a sandwich when I see Jenny Carpenter pulling into my garage. I settle into a chair, and 5 minutes later, a black BMW pulls up and Suit enters the house through the front door. This time, he's there for almost 90 minutes, and the whole time I'm thinking about how stupid I'll look if I say anything to Chris, and it all turns out to be a big mistake. I tell myself that I don't know her family. The Suit could be her brother or her cousin. He could even be Chris's brother. I don't. The rest of Wednesday passes without incident. Chris never showed up for a beer on Tuesday, but late Wednesday night I heard a knock on the door. "Is the beer invitation still open?" "Of course it is. Do me a favor, have 2. I'll wait for you in the living room." We spent a pleasant hour before Chris had to head home. I watched him closely the whole time and didn't detect a single note of displeasure or distraction. If there was something going on, he wasn't aware of it. I thought about asking him what he might know about BMWs, or if he had any relatives who had such a car, but decided I could never do that. So I gave it up. Thursday was a carbon copy of Tuesday. I divided my time between exercising and treating my knee, then working on my projects, taking my pills, and doing it all over again. Life was getting boring and predictable. Meanwhile, Dan was mastering the fine art of washing the car, the Daniels were taking a walk, and Herb was visiting Sally Perkins. That old fart has more work this week than I've had in 2 years. I guess that last remark is something I should explain. You see, 2 years ago, my wife Peg died. She was my lover and my best friend. Her death was due to being in the wrong place at the wrong time when a distracted city truck driver ran a red light. I was assured that she didn't suffer, but I certainly did. I keep a picture of her on the table by my chair. Both of our children are living their lives as they should, but sometimes it gets lonely. They offered to be with me during my recovery, but I told them I would be fine. After all, I have Nurse Payne to take care of me. When I told my kids that I was ready to be stuck at home for a few weeks and that I had saved a few cases of beer to get me through, my daughter looked at her brother, and the next thing I knew, the fridge and freezer were full. And I was just kidding, wasn't I? Friday came and Maggie was punctual as always. I was ready for breakfast, pills, and coffee, so she wasted no time in getting ready and started on me. "You're progressing fast, Henry. You must be fanatical about your exercise." "If I'm progressing so damn fast, damn, that hurts. Why do you keep working me like a redneck prison guard?" "Do you have any experience with prison guards?" I swear sometimes I don't know whether to laugh or curse at this woman. The last torture session is over, and she comes back from the kitchen with an ice pack. "I know the weekend is approaching, but I want you to continue your exercises on Saturday and Sunday as well." I took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll see you on Monday then, okay?" "Okay." "There's no enthusiasm in your words, Henry. Are you becoming immune to my charms?" "Okay." That made me laugh lightly, and I gave out a response I later regretted. "Have a good weekend, and I'll have until Monday to buy new locks for the door." She giggled. "Next week, we will start cane work and try to get you off the walker." I like the sound of that. Deal. That came off as Nurse Payne's banter, and with that she left. Friday stretched on like every day. Dan trimmed the bushes in front of the house, the Daniels went for a walk, and Herb visited Sally Perkins. I was thinking about how life had become so terribly predictable when a black BMW pulled into the carpenter's driveway. I must not have noticed Jenny pull into her garage. I wondered if they had a regular schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and how long it lasted. I made myself a sandwich and helped myself to a beer, then watched quietly as the suit drove off, followed 10 minutes later by Sally. Then a terrible longing came over me. I like those two, Sally and Chris. They are caring and kind, always seemed loving and attentive to each other. What I saw now seemed so awful, so out of character with her. I searched my mind for a plausible explanation and recognized it was all speculation on my part, but it bothered me terribly. That weekend I did two things: watched to see if the suit would visit them while Chris was home, and started making plans. He never showed up, and my plans progressed quickly. I felt strongly about what I was up to. If someone had asked me if I was sure I was doing the right thing, I would have said, I don't know. What I did know was that if I went to Jenny with anything resembling an accusation, she would deny it, and I would be called an abusive old man, and I would lose 2 friends. If I turn to Chris, he'll lash out at me, and again I'll be labeled an abusive old man and lose 2 friends. And if I ignored it, I'd have a hard time looking Chris in the eye and pretending to be his friend while hiding the painful truth from him. The only solution was to help him see for himself and hope I was wrong. Over the weekend, I made a list of my needs if I were to expand the store as I planned. By then, I was already thinking about tables to chairs. I need open space to move large pieces of wood to the machines, and 240-volt electricity in several locations. I also need space for workbenches where I can work by hand, fitting mortise and stud joints, and then I need clean space for finishing. All in all, I need to at least double my current space. I sketched out a few ideas, playing with a few concepts, until I realized that I also needed extra wood storage space because the tables need large pieces of hardwood and the cabinets use a lot of high-quality plywood with quality veneers for the drawers. This was all turning into a lot of work. Sunday night I went to bed with a heavy heart, knowing that the week ahead would likely be painful for someone, but I also knew that someone could be me. Monday morning came, and with it came the arrival of Nurse Payne. I knew what to do, and by then even I realized we were making progress. If torture meant I could go back to work, then so be it. She left me sipping my coffee again and balancing with an ice pack on my knee. I tried to work, but my mind couldn't focus. Dan was mowing the lawn again, and the Daniels were out for a walk. Jim Perkins was back from his travels, but he still had an office in the town where he worked, so Herb visited Sally Perkins again. I couldn't help but wonder why someone stays in a marriage if they feel the need to cheat on their spouse. Was it money, security, or just a bad habit? Wasn't it a game to them, some despicable way to bring a little excitement into their boring lives? They probably think they'll never get caught. I liked both Herb's wife and Sally's husband. They deserved the best. It was noon, and I watched as Jenny pulled into her garage and lowered the door. 5 minutes later, a black BMW pulled into the driveway, and I watched the suit re-enter the Carpenter house as if he lived there. The decision was made, and I knew what I had to do. An hour later, the suit left, and after a little while more, Jenny left. It broke my heart. Monday afternoon and Tuesday passed without much incident. I tried to do chores, answered the occasional call from the workshop, and watched the neighbors. Nothing seemed to change. Wednesday morning, I watched Chris leave for work. Maggie came over and checked on me, and then I sat with ice and coffee and watched her leave. It was time. I picked up my cell phone and called Chris. Chris Carpenter here. Chris, this is Henry Bennett. How's it going? Good, Henry. To what do I owe the pleasure? That phrase stabbed me like a knife. If this goes the way I expect, no one's going to enjoy it. I was wondering if I could tempt you with a sandwich and a beer for lunch. I heard him chuckle. Wow, that's a hard offer to refuse. And since you'll be here, I'm thinking about expanding my workshop and would love to see what ideas you might have. Chris thought for a moment. Sure, I can stop by your place tonight and we can work on your ideas. Now it's the turn of the big hype. Actually, my kids are going to come visit tonight and I have everything ready to go. I was hoping you could come over today at, say, 11:30 or noon. I couldn't stand lying to him like that. Sure, why not? I could use a break from my routine. Okay, I'll be there at lunchtime and we can talk about the new workshop. Great. I'll see you then. I felt like crap. There are a dozen ways things could go wrong, starting with Chris calling his wife, Jenny, and the suit not showing up today, her seeing Chris's car in my driveway, and so on. I was sure I could claim ignorance either way, but wouldn't that make me a coward? Unfortunately for everyone, Jenny and the suit turned out to be as predictable as the rest of my neighbors. Chris arrived at about 11:45 and joined me in the front room. I laid out all my notes and drawings, and after Chris brought us each a beer from the fridge, we settled in with sandwiches, chips, and a cold glass. From there, things went on from there. We sat at the table by my front window and started going through my list of needs as I saw them. I showed him a blueprint of my current workshop and started showing him sketches of what I had in mind. At 12:05, Jenny pulled into her garage. Chris watched her for a while with a slightly confused but happy smile on his face, and then we resumed our conversation and were in a fairly productive stage of making plans when at 12:10 a black BMW pulled into Chris's driveway. Chris was talking and stopped abruptly when a suit stepped out of the car and re-entered his front door as if he lived there. I watched my friend in silence and waited. He tried to go back to his drawings, but to no avail. I guess about 10 minutes passed while Chris tried to talk, studied the plans, but went back to watching his house until my friend said, "Excuse me." Without further ado, he got up, walked out the front door, and crossed the street to his house. It was strange, but I could have sworn that this time I watched the man walk through his own front door as if he no longer lived there, and wondered how long he would be my neighbor. My window was open, and after a few moments I heard a commotion. There was shouting, yelling, exclamations, and what sounded like furniture being thrown. I heard the clinking of broken glass and the loud thumping of chairs against the wall. Shortly afterward, a half-dressed suit ran out of the front door, jumped into a car, and sped away. There was silence after that. Time passed, and just as I was beginning to worry that Chris might have harmed his wife, he walked out of his house just as he had entered it and walked back across the street to my house. He just plopped down on my couch with that 1,000-mile stare I'd heard about and said nothing. I decided it was my job to wait until he was ready to talk, and at the right moment, he did. "That fool slept with him in our bed. Can you believe that? It's Jenny, of all people, right?" I stood up and handed him the rest of my beer with the words, "Here, have a drink and I'll get you a refill." He drank it in one gulp. Thinking he needed to talk, I asked, "Did you see them?" He just nodded. "Are you sure it was consensual?" He sounded like he was in a daze. "I heard her. She was a willing participant. Despite all my observations and planning, I didn't know what to do next, so I brought Chris a second beer and sat back down to be the interested listener I assumed he needed. Finally, he began. "A husband should never expect what I saw. My wife was naked with that asshole. She had her legs wrapped around him and was making all the same noises she was making with me, only louder. She was enjoying it." Then Chris looked at me and said, "I saw him when he got off her. There was nothing special about him. This was going to be a leisurely discussion, and I need to let my friend talk as long as he wants." When he was quiet long enough, I said, "I heard a lot of noise, like glass being broken and furniture being thrown. You didn't do anything you regret, did you?" "No." Then after a pause, I said, "Not unless you count marrying that traitor." At that moment, I saw Jenny's car slowly backing out into the road. She seemed to hesitate for a while and then drove off. I think I just saw Jenny drive off. "Yes, I told her to get her cheating ass out of the house." Chris's hands were shaking and his complexion looked like death. I knew the next sentence would sound bad, but it had to be said. "You need time to come to terms with what just happened. It may not be the end of the world. I'm not saying it will be easy, but I know the girl loves you. Maybe you can patch things up when you have some time to think about it." The look he threw at me wasn't encouraging. It was then that I made my big mistake. Thinking that misery loves company, I blabbed, "You're not alone. Herb Jackson is at Sally Perkins' house every day while her husband is at work." Chris only shook his head in disgust and muttered something to himself. Then he turned to me. "You knew, didn't you? Is that why you asked me to come tonight? What's the matter? Does that asshole show up every day like clockwork?" I tried not to interfere, but Chris can't be denied. "Well, It was with great reluctance that I answered. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as far as I can tell. For how long? Chris's rage was building. Last week, and now this week. I don't know how long it's been going on. For a while, I stopped worrying about Jenny and started worrying about myself. Chris was showing signs of a beaten man, and there was anger in his eyes. I remember thinking, this is what happens when a wife cheats on her husband. She robs him of his pride, and that's when anger takes over. Chris's anger seemed to dissipate for a while as my friend dropped his face into his hands and sobbed. At this point, I was overcome with regret, and again I wondered if I should have just closed my eyes and let events go as they were meant to, but these idiots parked their car right in front of the house where all the neighbors could see it. What did they expect? At least Herb is trying to be a little restrained, although I no longer respect him for it. After that, it was a long and mostly quiet hour while Chris drank his second and eventually third beer. I tried to find a way to reassure him that what he did was justified, while simultaneously reminding him that she loved him, even if it didn't seem that way right now. I don't know how successful that was. On his cell phone, Chris informed the office that he wouldn't be in today, and eventually went home after I invited him to stay as long as he wanted. He only shook his head, saying, "I'm going to have to face it sooner or later, and it's better to let it happen sooner." He left his car in my driveway and went back to his house a broken man. An hour later, he returned and I poured him another beer. He said, "I've cleaned up almost all the mess. There might still be shards of broken mirror in the carpet." When I asked how the mirror ended up broken, he smiled. The asshole ducked. The chair missed him and hit the mirror. In a foolish attempt to support him, I said, "I was surprised he was able to get away on his own." "Yeah, I'm sorry about that." "Well, that's good. You don't want to end up in jail because of that asshole." And he just shrugged and shook his head like he didn't know. We sat and drank into the evening. I heated up the leftover roast in a failed attempt to sober up, and Jenny never came home that night. Then, long after dark, Chris made the lonely journey back to his house. Thursday morning, Chris's car was still parked in my driveway, so I called his house after the allotted time, hoping he might be up and sober. He didn't answer the first time, but called back a half hour later. When I called, he was in the shower. I asked him, "Would you like some breakfast? I can cook or you can drive us somewhere." "Why don't I drive? Are you fit to drive?" He only laughed sadly and said, "Yes, I can drive. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He kept his word, and 10 minutes later he was at my door. We stopped at a diner in town where I decided my job was to just listen if he wanted to talk. There were other people around us, so we were quiet. The night before, Jenny had called late the night before, trying to apologize. She spoke through tears, and to Chris's credit, he kept his cool. He wasn't ready to see her, so she said that when he was ready, she would be at her sister's house. After that, I didn't hear much about their confrontation. Chris would come over once or twice a week, and we'd have a few beers while he asked vague and mostly introspective questions about the marriage. I got the distinct impression that things were not going well. That impression was confirmed when a "for sale" sign appeared in the front yard of the house. He said they were getting a divorce, and that he was grateful they didn't have children yet. The most telling thing he said about it was that in therapy, Jenny admitted that she was very good at compartmentalizing her life, and that her lover had nothing to do with their marriage. Chris only shook his head and muttered, "Bloody psycho." And that was the end of our conversation. He learned that the affair had gone on longer than he could forgive. It was sad to see their marriage disintegrate, and I asked myself many times if I should have just turned a blind eye to it, in the hope that Jenny would wise up and Chris would never find out. Inevitably, I asked myself how I would have felt if I were Chris, and each time I decided that I would have hated the friend who kept this secret from me. Jenny and Chris divorced and went their separate ways. It took years before Chris confided in another woman, but when he did, it seemed like a good choice. He met a widow his own age with young children, and she knew what loyalty was. Chris had always wanted children and took to fatherhood like a duck to water. We remained friends, and he built an addition to my workshop. As for me, I never remarried. I've already told you that my wife died 2 years before her knee surgery. She was everything I ever wanted in a partner, and I miss her to this day. I decided that she was my limit, and I never tempted fate again. However, I have a few girlfriends who have no complaints about me, can't get pregnant no matter how hard we try, and still like to sleep with a man from time to time. Yes, menopause is our friend. I have a good job, great kids, and company when I want it. Life is good. However, life wasn't so good for one Herbert Jackson. It all happened about 2 weeks after Chris discovered his wife with that suit. I was sitting by my window. By then, I was getting around pretty well with the help of a cane and was splitting my time between the office and home. I wasn't ready for shop work yet, but I was slowly getting there. I was going over the blueprints for the kitchen remodel and making an estimate when I heard the familiar sound of glass breaking and furniture hitting the wall. I looked over at the Perkins house and saw Herb Jackson running out the front door naked and running down the street with his pants in his hands, followed by Jim Perkins swinging a baseball bat. I said to myself, another one caught. Jim looked very motivated, and I estimated Herb's chances of making it home no better than 50/50ths. I never found out who tipped Jim Perkins off, but I suspect it might have been a very angry carpenter who lived nearby. A week after that, I finally went back to the shop, worked late, and thanked Providence that I was no longer sitting at my window watching the neighbors' lives in my own Peyton place. The end.